Okay, I'm texting Delian, and we got him in the studio. Welcome to the show. How you doing,
Hey,
Delian?
sorry, I promise. I'm normally, right on the dot this time.
Oh, you're all good. Welcome to the
What's
show. We got
up?
some breaking
3 for
news.
3. 3
Breaking
for
news.
3.
Announcing it here exclusively on TBPN. Tell us what happened with the capsule. No one knows, so you're hearing it here first.
At 6:13 p.m. PST on Wednesday, early evening, we executed a deorbit burn, which happened sort of on the opposite side, roughly, of the globe from Australia, and we came in ripping through the atmosphere, 17,000 miles an hour. Capsule has sort of GPS all throughout, so we're tracking it. I actually got a good photo of me, my co-founder, and our CTO, and me holding a little baby, watching that GPS track, sort of coming in. It's sometimes a little anticlimactic because unlike a rocket launch where you can kind of do the live stream, you watch it from the ground, move up. A reentry capsule is like moving very, very fast, kind of hard to track, kind of hard to do a live stream. And literally the way that we call things out is just like it's got this GPS thing, and we know that the parachutes have opened successfully only when we just see that the GPS like vertical slows down.
This is super bullish for the conspiracy theorists. They're like, oh, there's no live stream. Did it even go to space? Who knows? Maybe he's making it up.
I just think you're doing
Throwing
it.
it out of
You're
a
doing
truck.
Out into the desert,
You need you need to create some type of way for Americans to bet on reentry.
Ooh, yeah.
That is it's just
Polymarket.
un-American. I mean, I know you're bringing it down in Australia, but it's frankly un-American that you're not letting us all, place our bets. But
Anyway,
3 for 3.
congratulations.
Was pushing me on, you should figure out how to make more gambling in aerospace. And I was like, look, man, the easiest way is just like gamble on, sort of mission outcomes. And so this is how we know we're not at peak gambling yet, is there's not enough gambling on all these hyper specific technical outcomes. People will gamble on like, will Starship land, but I want it like down to like the individual, sort of like, meter of just like, is it going to take 5 seconds to land, 6 seconds to land? Like, is it going to come into this T trajectory?
Well,
We live in a
speaking
hardware-rich
of
world.
yeah, well, speaking of betting and instead of P Doom, what's your P Dome? I want your take on the Golden Dome. What's the probability that America gets a Golden Dome in the next few years? And we do have missile defense, right? Like missile defense is a thing. We're not domeless right now, but like we're talking about just improving what we have, right? We're not flying blind here, hopefully.
Yeah, let me give the sort of bull versus bear case.
Sure.
All this stuff is sort of somewhat predicated on obviously what Israel has been able to show, and especially over the past sort of couple years, especially countering some of the Iranian attacks that have happened. If you were to like take the Israeli system and then extrapolate it to like the scale of the United States, it just doesn't really work, right? They're a really small geography, very dense. It is actually possible to set up basically like, missile defense batteries across their entire border.
Yeah.
If you were to do that across like the entire United States, sort of border around the continental US, and you extrapolate the cost of it, it's something on the order of like a $10 trillion program.
Wow. And we're not fighting with Canada or Mexico or like even smaller like states. Like these are low flying projectiles. They're just wildly different, right?
Yeah, the threat vectors are also totally different. You're looking at like Russia, North Korea, Iran, etc. And so that solution set sort of looks very different. And so that's the premise of Golden Dome, and it's the first time that they've opened the Overton window on considering things that aren't just like ground, air, or sea based. For the first time in the Golden Dome language, they talk about a lot of sort of space-based applications, in particular space-based intercept. So the idea there is like if Russia or North Korea basically launches a missile towards the United States, right now we do have, like you said, we're not domeless. We do have some systems. They're basically scattered from like Guam to Hawaii to Alaska, etc. Basically like all of our furthest out areas, and for sure along the sort of border as well, but furthest out areas that are closer to those adversaries to take them out. Before they get anywhere close to the United States. The idea is now you can just have a constellation of satellites that are orbiting above North Korea, Russia, et cetera, regularly. So you can take this stuff out before it even gets up into like the upper end of its, sort of trajectory. Now, that type of system is also not trivially, sort of cheap. So here's, my bull versus bear case. You're asking, is it, sort of going to happen? We proposed a system like this in the early 1980s, right?
Star Wars, right?
Yeah, Star Wars days, the
Great name.
Space Development Initiative, I think it was called, or Space Defense Initiative.
SDI.
They ran some early trade studies that had a lot of enthusiasm in Congress, et cetera, and then ultimately it fell apart, partially because the like scale of the economics of it relative to the like the sort of benefits of the defense sort of the nation just didn't really entirely pencil out. And so the sort of bear case for sort of Golden Dome would be maybe we end up in that same world where we like start to run these analyses, we do these things, and then all we do is really just like buy a couple of traditional terrestrial, basically missile, defense battery systems that already exist, and we make those sensors a little better. Like the current, one is this thing called, sort of THAAD is basically like the largest, sort of system. It actually doesn't have a particularly high hit rate of being able to take out the missiles on the way in. And so, right now I think we have like 40 THAAD missiles, and I think they have like something like a 25%, sort of hit rate. So it's like we can take out like 10 ICBMs. Russia has like 1,000. And so, we're like a little off on order of magnitude. So maybe it's like make that one a little more accurate, et cetera. So that's sort of like, I would say the like, maybe not default case, but that is like the downside case of like, we announce this stuff, we talk about it. When it comes down to like the economics and actually implementing this, it becomes too tricky. Congress flips from, sort of Republican to Democrat, in the next election cycle. They don't want to give, sort of President Trump a win. And so they decide to shut it down. The bull case is, okay, well, relative to the 1980s, there's a lot of people that can actually do pretty near-term demonstrations of this, right? Obviously orbital rockets this year are launching and landing every single day. There's a lot of companies that, are looking to pitch in on this that aren't just people that are going to throw out white papers, but are actually like very hardware rich, right? There may be a lot of over enthusiasm in the defense tech, funding space and ecosystem. But like, look, we were talking about this earlier this week. Like, look at what Venus Aerospace, sort of just demonstrated, right? Like, while there is maybe over enthusiasm and lots of funding, at least people are translating into like real hardware demonstrations of like next generation technologies. And so if there's a set of companies that before Congress flips is actually able to go and do some real world demonstrations, show that this is practical capability, get some defense funding, sort of flowing into actually operationalizing those initiatives, so that by the time it flips, there's already something that's sort of pseudo operational or very close. Now it becomes a little harder to justify. It's like, yeah, there's some political win if you're a Democrat to not give, sort of Trump a win. But like, the defense budget has always been, sort of very bipartisan as well. So that's my sort of like bull versus, sort of bear. It's like, for the first time in history, we can probably demonstrate this really quickly, and we've got a 2-year window, and it's a, sort of national priority. Bear is, it's pretty easy for us to just, sort of flip back to just doing what we, have always done.
You mentioned Venus Aerospace. They put up a post yesterday. They said, today, Venus Aerospace made history. We completed the first ever U.S. flight of a rotating detonation rocket engine, proving runway-based high-speed flight is possible. I don't really understand what a rotating detonation rocket engine is. Do you understand the applications of this? Is this defense tech or space tech? Is this commercial? Is this DoD program? Like, what is the story here with Venus?
It's been a minute since so I met up with the Venus team, but the last time that I chatted with them, the intention of what they were building was to create these, sort of space planes that would basically take off from a runway, get out of the atmosphere, cross across the globe, and go land back on a runway. And so that was sort of the, sort of commercial case. It'd obviously be, sort of very expensive on a per seat, sort of basis, but there's obviously, sort of plenty of people in the world that would pay significant in order to be able to like, get from LA to Tokyo, but do that in like, in theory, you could do that in under an hour, basically. Like if you think about how quickly it takes you to orbit between those two, it's roughly 45 minutes.
Yeah, this is like SpaceX point to point.
Yeah, exactly. But using, sort of traditional runways rather than having to build out, all the like SpaceX basically like landing infrastructure, like, their planes can actually take off and land on, sort of normal runways.
Yeah.
And so their engine definitely, demonstration, is obviously the very key first step of being able to, and then, apologies at home today. So
Hey,
welcome to the stream.
We should just spend the next few minutes just turn this into a kid show.
Yeah.
At least one of our kids are probably watching at home.
Let's break it down. Batman or Superman?
Dinosaurs.
Dinosaurs. T-Rex or Velociraptor?
Fire trucks.
Fire trucks.
Fire trucks. I like it.
Yeah.
What about rockets, though? Rockets versus space planes.
Ooh.
Rockets. I mean,
I think we got to go to our child correspondent. Is it rockets or airplanes?
Rockets or space planes? I think enthusiastic about both.
Oh my gosh! I can't wait till he's co-hosting the show with our children.
Yeah, we could only get
30
Delian
years
for
from
15 minutes today. It'd be so much easier if you could just delegate this whole call-in thing to your son. It'd be fantastic.
He'd be a much more entertaining guest. Okay, yeah. I know we didn't quite make it to the top of the hour, but maybe I'll go take care of this bad boy.
No, this was great. It's great having both you guys on.
Quick Delta V today.
Yeah, we'll talk to you soon.
Cheers. Talk soon.
Have a good one.
Have fun, guys.